Ever read a story and it just felt like, I don't know, kind of hollow? Like technically it works, but it just doesn't grab you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get that.
Like the writing's fine, maybe even good, but something's off.
Right. It's missing that heart, that thing that makes you really care.
Exactly. And I've been digging into this writing text, and it turns out there's actually a reason that happens.
A lot of times it's because the story's built from the outside in instead of the inside out.
Okay, so that's what we're diving into today, this whole inside-out approach. What's your take on it? You've had some time to, sit with this idea.
So imagine a story is like, a symphony, right? There's this core melody, a theme that kind of echoes through the whole thing. Everything else, the instruments, the rhythm, it all comes from that initial idea.
Okay.
And this text is saying stories should be like that too.
So instead of starting with plot, it's more about figuring out the why of the story.
Yeah, exactly. Discovering the story's essence, like its DNA. And get this, the text actually lays out 7 key steps to do this. Calls them the building blocks of narrative DNA.
7 steps. Oh, listeners know I love a good framework. Gotta write these down.
It's like, just like DNA determines how a living thing turns out, these steps give you a blueprint for a solid story.
Interesting.
But we'll get into those in a bit.
Can't wait. But first, I'm curious about how this inside-out thing works with characters.
So this is where it gets really interesting. Instead of just giving characters traits, like they're on a menu or something.
A character is a sarcastic detective with a tragic past, that kind of thing.
Exactly. It's more like they should kind of grow out of the story's core.
So you let those details come naturally from, like, the themes and the conflicts and all that.
Yeah, think of it like a seed. It's got all the info to become a specific plant, right?
Right.
The story's core concept, that's your seed. It holds like the blueprint for the characters that belong in that world.
That's actually a really cool way to think about it. So instead of forcing characters into a box, we're letting the story tell us who they are.
Exactly. And that naturally makes them more compelling because they're not just there for the plot, they're woven into the fabric of the story.
What happens if you don't do that? What did the text say about generic characters?
It was pretty blunt about it, actually. It said they can totally sabotage a story, even if everything else is good.
Because without those strong characters, even a complex plot just falls flat. It's like, I don't know, watching a movie with amazing special effects, but the acting's terrible.
Yes, it's all about the characters and their journeys. That's what makes us connect, makes us care about what happens. And when they feel real, when their choices make sense because of who they are, that's when a story becomes something special.
Totally. Okay, so we've got characters down, but
Yeah.
what about the world of the story? How does that tie into the inside-out thing?
Ever notice how some stories you just get sucked into the world, right?
Yeah, totally.
Like it feels real, even if it's, made up.
Yeah, it just clicks.
So this text says that shouldn't be an accident. It says the world should actually come from your main character, your protagonist.
See, that's a new one for me. I always
Yeah.
thought world building was like its own thing,
Yeah. Right.
You build the world, then you drop your character in.
Yeah.
So how's it work the other way around?
Well, think of it this way. Your main character, right, with all their baggage and their, internal struggles, they're not just randomly placed in some setting. Their presence kind of shapes the world around them.
Okay.
The folks they meet, the places they go, even the little details they pick up on, it all adds up to a world that feels made for them.
So it's less about creating this whole intricate universe and more about focusing on what directly affects your main character's journey.
Yeah, it's like shining a light on a stage, right? You're not illuminating the whole thing, just the parts the audience needs to see for that particular scene. Creates a sense of focus, a little intimacy, but there's a bigger world out there.
Got it. So it's all connected, back to that inside-out idea. You're not just building a world, you're letting it grow from your character,
Yeah,
which, adds a whole other layer to the story.
definitely.
Okay, but let's talk about something that always trips me up. Symbolism.
Huh?
A love-hate thing with symbolism.
Yeah, a lot of people do.
Sometimes it feels so heavy-handed, like the author's trying to hit you over the head with their message.
Instead of being subtle about it.
Exactly. But this text had a different take. It talked about compressed meaning, which sounds kind of cool, but also a little vague. What's that all about?
Okay, so picture this. A symbol, like a recurring image, right? Or an object. It's like this suitcase packed with meaning.
Okay.
It can be complex ideas, emotions, even the whole point of your story, but it's all condensed, like really impactful.
So instead of just saying this character's lonely,
Yeah.
you might use imagery of, like, empty spaces, that sort of thing.
There you go. And the best symbols, they usually pop up naturally from the story itself. Like,
Right.
remember that green light in The Great Gatsby?
Yeah, yeah.
On the surface, it's just a light, right?
Yeah.
But it becomes this whole other thing. Gatsby's desires, his dreams, everything he can't have.
That's such a good example. It's those layers of meaning that make you really think, you know? And
Mhm.
it's like that aha moment when you realize what it all means. It's like,
It clicks.
yeah. Okay, so we've done characters, world building, even symbolism.
Yeah.
How does the plot fit into all of this?
So this text is not a fan of what it calls the what happens next style of plotting. Like, the writer's just making things up as they go, no real direction.
Ugh, yes. I've definitely read those. It's just like one random thing after another.
And it falls flat, right? Because it feels so haphazard. There's no sense that it had to happen that way.
So instead of relying on those external plot devices, you're saying,
Let it come from within. Let it emerge from your characters, the world you've built, those core themes we talked about. That's where you find a plot that feels truly inevitable.
and I'm guessing this is where those 7 key steps we mentioned come in. They're like the guideposts.
Bingo. They're not a rigid formula or anything, but they're a way to make sure your story unfolds in a way that feels both, surprising and like it was meant to be.
Makes sense. You're setting the stage for the story to tell itself, basically.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the foundation of a story, but what about dialogue? Where does that fit into this whole inside-out thing?
All right, so this is where the text gets kind of poetic. It talks about symphonic dialogue.
Okay, hold up. So our characters are going to be, like, singing their lines now.
Not quite, but it's a cool way to think about it. Remember how we were talking about a symphony before?
Yeah, with the core melody and all that.
Right. So each part of the symphony, each instrument adds something to the whole thing, right?
Mm.
Dialogue can be like that too. It's not just about moving the plot forward.
So it's doing more than one thing at the same time.
Exactly. Dialogue can tell us about the characters, hint at what's coming later, even echo those core themes we've been talking about. It's all about those layers of meaning.
So even, like, a random comment could actually be important to the whole story.
Totally. Think about when you watch a movie for the second time, right?
Right.
And you pick up on stuff you totally missed the first time. Good dialogue can do that. The more you pay attention, the more you discover. It's like rewarding you for really listening.
So it's like each line has this weight to it, you know? It's got to
Yeah.
earn its place.
Exactly. And just like a composer picks the right note for the right moment, writers have to choose their words carefully for dialogue. Every line needs a purpose.
Got it, yeah. Okay, so we've covered a lot. Characters, world building, symbolism, plot, even how to write dialogue. And this whole time, it all comes back to that inside-out idea. So what's the takeaway for our listeners, even if they're not, writers?
The cool thing is, this isn't just about writing stories. It's a different way of thinking about creativity in general. Like, real originality comes from inside us, right? Those unique ideas that only we have.
So whether you're writing a book, giving a presentation, or just telling a funny story to your friends, it's about finding those ideas within yourself.
Exactly. Trusting that if you build something from a place of, authenticity, passion, all the technical stuff will fall into place. It's like the words just come easier.
Which makes me think about how the author said this whole approach can make writing more fun,
Oh, yeah.
When you're excited about what you're doing, it just flows.
100%. It's the difference between just going through the motions and really, truly connecting with your work.
And that passion, it rubs off on people. It pulls readers in, keeps them hooked, and makes your story stay with them long after they're done.
Because it's about connection, right? At its core, storytelling. It's sharing a piece of yourself and inviting other people to share in that.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, here's something to think about. What if we lived our lives that way? Inside out, Instead of worrying about what everyone else expects, what if we focused on our own story, our own themes, our own reasons for being? Something to ponder. Until next time, keep exploring, keep creating, and as always, thanks for diving deep with us.